Hello, I'm Noel McDermott, and I'm delighted to be back on men's radio and women's radio station with my brand new program, The Wellbeing Show. This year, all of us are under so much more stress, more than ever before. So I hope my program will offer you practical help and advice.
Hi, welcome to The Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Neil McDermott, and this week we have a fantastic guest, Tricia Woolfrey. Did I say that correct? I hope I did.
You did.
Right, well done. First time, so not bad. Even for somebody with a flu jab, I managed to get that out correct. So congratulations to me. Welcome to the show. This is actually a pre-recorded show this week, so don't ring in. Because otherwise you'll disturb me doing something else. Mind you, but it's all right. Why not ring in and disturb me doing something else? That's okay. Tricia is a coach, hypnotherapist as well, I think.
Yeah, I call myself an integrative therapist and coach.
Right. There we go.
So I kind of use a whole blend of techniques.
Well, tell us about that. But first, tell us how are things going now that I guess we're thinking about the end of this coronavirus thing. But we were just saying just before the show started that people have been struggling. How about yourself? How have you managed during this time, and how are you managing?
Personally, or with my clients?
With yourself, personally.
Yeah. So I've been doing okay. I have had some bereavements, unfortunately, which made it very tough. And not being able to go to the funerals has been really hard as well. So I really feel for anybody that's been in that position, because it's funerals are really important to be able to say goodbye to people that you really care about. And when you're not allowed to do that, it really does affect you quite a bit. So we have had our own at-home funeral for people, which was an approximation of what was going on. We were able to follow what was going on. We got the music list and the reading, so we were able to be there without being there. So that was a good approximation, but it's not nearly the same as attending. So that's been really, really tough. But I've been doing fine because I'm massively productive. I'm not somebody who hangs around. So I've produced lots of free resources for people. I've learned skills I didn't know I had. And I've made sure that I've kept my exercise, because we couldn't go to the gym, and I thought, now what's going to happen to me? So I've made sure that I've kept my exercise up, which has been quite easy to do. So
I switched to running. What about yourself? What did you do?
Oh, I don't run because I've got a dog, and I broke a rib once running with my dog, and I'm never going to do that again. I'm also quite clumsy, even if I didn't have a dog, so I'm bound to trip into something or other. So no, what I do, I go to the gym when you can, and I do yoga, and I've become acquainted with Yoga with Adrienne, who's brilliant. I didn't think I'd like online yoga, but this one is really good, and actually they're not long sessions, and I thought, that's going to not be as good, but I don't know why. A 20-minute session seems to be as impactful as a 60-minute session. So that's been great. So I've really enjoyed those. And I also have my own routine that I do every day. So or it's very rare that I don't do it anyway. Yeah.
Good. So you've really thought about what your needs are during this time, and sort of made sure that you meet them.
I just noticed that if I don't do these things, so I don't know, I don't want to do exercise. I don't think, wow, let's go and do that now. Let's halt everything else so I can do my exercise. I just know how it makes me feel once I've done it.
Great.
And how it makes me feel if I don't do it. So it's that kind of a motivation, really. So it's just kind of taking care of myself, even if I don't feel like it.
Which is a very sensible way of doing it. I mean, in terms of cognitive behavioural therapy, that's one of the core skills that we teach people, is you do things because it's good for you and it's in your diary, rather than you do things because of how you feel about it. Yeah. Is that very much how you sort of structure your life in a sense?
So it's kind of, I don't know, I'm massively motivated, and I have been accused of being competitive, which really challenges me, because I'm so not competitive. If you were to play a game with me, I absolutely don't care if I win or lose. I do care if I have fun, and I do care if I've done my best. So with tennis, I'm really rubbish at it. But I don't care if I lose the game, as long as I've played my best tennis. So I think what people connect with is more my drive. So, I am very, very ideas orientated. So during lockdown, I've created lots of things. I didn't think, oh dear, what shall I do with my time? I must create things so I don't get bored. I don't think that way. I just my brain fills up with stuff, and so I get creating. And that's because I'm naturally inspired by what I do. So that really, really, really helps. Yeah. So I'm rarely in a kind of like, I can't be bothered phase at all. I don't think I've ever.
Great. That sounds fantastic. So you have this sort of energy levels and you want to work with them, and you want to,
yeah.
And that's a sort of, those things are what we think of as a positive sort of cycle rather than a vicious cycle. You're into, you invest in that.
Hard. So I need to kind of, so I was doing some work at the weekend, which I'm not supposed to do. And I just thought, no, I notice I'm not concentrating now. I notice it's harder work taking this in. So I need to stop. So I'm much better at stopping than I ever was before. But I've still got the drive to start.
Yeah.
I'm just listening to myself better when I need to stop.
Yeah. And one of the conversations I've been having with a lot of people, similar type of conversation, is also understanding that, during these times in particular, we maybe need to think about our self-care and also managing our diaries more effectively, having less expectation during the day. Has that been true for you as well?
I have to manage my diary really well anyway, because I have appointments all the time, and if I didn't manage my diary, I would just be letting people down every 5 minutes. So I've always been good at that, and I don't know if I would have been good if I hadn't done this work, but anyway, somehow I'm good at it. But self-care, I do make some time for. I'm not as good as I should be.
Right.
That's a great word, isn't that a wonderful word? And I think my drive gets in the way. I do get very enthusiastic about what I do, but I need to make sure that I'm listening. So if I'm tired, then I need to stop and do something else. So it's kind of switching gears, doing something. Sometimes not doing anything is actually the right thing to do. Yeah. So I'm getting really good at just sitting and I've got a lovely chair where I can gaze out of the garden window.
Great.
And do nothing else other than that. And that's a really great thing to be able to do.
I'm very lucky. I'm blessed with a garden as well. And it's I've got French windows, and I just go and sit and all that sort of stuff. It's beautiful. Yeah. I'm wondering which came first, which was the chicken and egg, your sort of drive or the work. Have you always been like this? Do you remember as a young child, were you driven and motivated then?
I do remember at school, I always liked learning.
Right.
So, I didn't like all of my lessons. I remember the history lesson was really boring because all we had to do was copy the writing that the teacher had just written on the board. So I don't know if he had been more engaging, whether I would enjoy history now is hard to know. But I have no interest in history at all. But I do remember being really curious and wanting to learn how, why, oh, that's interesting. Oh, isn't that great? Yeah. So that's been a natural thing of mine. And, even after I finished my education, I have not had any time where I've not been learning something. And I'm quite aged now. And I think, is this ever going to stop? And I thought, I don't think it's going to stop. I think this is just who I am. So,
where did you grow up, Tricia?
Excuse me. I grew up in the north of England, and I moved south. You might be able to detect a little accent when I was a teenager.
Right.
So I am in the south now. So most of my accent has worn off because it's been such a long time.
Yeah.
But I will still say bath because it's spelt with an A, not with an AR.
And toothpaste.
No, I wasn't that kind of northerner. No, I would say toothpaste. But I always say bath, and do you not, I think, is a very northern phrase.
Yeah.
And I would feel very false if I said bath. I would feel like I was pretending to be somebody else. But the rest of my accent has just worn off. It was never very strong anyway. And I quite like the fact that I've got my accent. It's part of who I am.
Yeah.
And
did you sort of grow up in a family that was very much about achievement and get things done, and was that important in your family?
My family always really worked hard, so my parents, they didn't have very much. And so their philosophy was to get on in life, you've got to work really hard. So that might be where my drive was. I don't think they wanted me to work quite so hard as I do work. In fact, they're not here anymore, but they used to get cross that I worked so hard.
Right.
I had to explain, I'm motivated. I'm not doing it because I should, or I'm scared not to do this stuff. I'm doing it because I really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So my father would always say, you know, you have to work hard, you have to work hard, you have to work hard. And my mother always had lots of jobs to just, you know, my dad had one job, which she worked hard. My mum had lots of part-time jobs. And I remember we had a B&B, so she did her job and she did a B&B. Oh, honestly, it was... So I've got a very, very strong work ethic.
Yeah, I mean, similar to me. I mean, both. And I come from a double income household, and I think I might even be older than you, to be honest. So I think I was one of those kids long before it became apparently a problem. But it was the norm when I grew up. You know, everybody worked and worked hard. And I remember having paper rounds on Saturdays and all that sort of stuff, and doing the milk round during the week. And was that you as well? You got lots of little jobs to...
I'll tell you what I had. So I had a paper round.
Right.
I had babysitting. I used to live in a seaside town. I used to clean holiday flats, and I used to work on a candy floss store where I made candy floss for kids, which I absolutely loved. So I did 4 jobs.
Fantastic.
And I didn't like. I only liked the candy floss one, and it was just such a joy to have a little child who you can barely see because they're so short, and you just make these great big candy flosses, and the look on their face when you made one that's too big for them, really. It was really.
So you learned early on the value of sort of working and sort of going your own way. Did you go to university after school? Was that your route?
No, I didn't. So because my parents didn't have very much money, I left the North at a critical time. I was 16. And so remembering that I loved education, I loved learning, I didn't even go to college. So I had the choice. I either went to work and earned a living, or I had to depend on my parents more, and they really struggled. There were 4 of us, and there were lots of problems in the family, which made money quite challenging. That, you know, there's a backstory which I won't bore you with, and so it was always a thing, and I didn't want to be a burden, so I just went to work straight away. And I remember my first wages, so there were wages then, £16 a week. £4 went on my travel to get to work. £4 went on my rent to my mum, and I had £4 to myself. It was great. You could buy stuff then with £4. You might be able to get yourself a coffee, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely. At least it wasn't shillings and pence, which would have been a very, very long time.
Would it have been shillings and pence then? I can't remember.
It may have been around, but £4 was a lot of money.
Who knows? I do remember shillings and pence.
I seem to remember the money in those days was a lot bigger as well.
It was a lot bigger, or were we smaller? No, it was
I think it actually was bigger. I think it was bigger them over time.
Yeah.
Somehow it was worth more, and over time, not only is the worth of money shrunk, but the actual size of it has gotten smaller.
And it feels a bit plasticky now. It feels like pretending.
Very plastic.
May as well use the Monopoly money.
But of course, money seems to have gone out the window during this time. It's all electronic now. Everybody.
Yeah, and I remember when they said we're not going to have checkbooks, which was a long time ago, and I thought I'm not going to not have my checkbook. I have to have my checkbook. Is how I keep monitor my expenses and stuff. And then people were talking about online banking. I'm not going to do online banking. It seems very, very dodgy or whatever. And actually, I can't think when I last wrote a check. And I love my online banking. It just saves me so much time.
Absolutely.
And of course, there are risks involved as well. So, you know, you have to be careful. But my thing is I'm time poor. So anything that saves me time is a bonus for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you sort of brought up in this very much of this work ethic, get on with things, and you went straight into work rather than education. How did you end up? What's the story of what are the stepping stones that led you into working as a performance coach and as a therapist?
Well, I want to say it's accidental. That's not strictly true, but it's kind of true. It wasn't planned is a better way of saying it. So I never had ambition ever. And I don't have ambition now. I just work hard. There's a massive difference. So people think I'm really ambitious and competitive. They're so wrong on that. So I started off very menial, like a clerical job, £16 a week. All I wanted to be was a wife and mother. I didn't even expect to have a career. I was just going to have loads of kids, and that was going to be my happiness. But so my first job wasn't great. My second job was all right. My third job is when I started to get into work. I had a work ethic anyway, but like, oh my God, this is exciting. And it was really a job that was above. I was 19 at the time, and they were looking. I remember the ad said we're looking for somebody at least 27.
Yeah.
And I applied for it, and I got it because I thought I'm intelligent, I work hard, and I learn quick. So that's all you need. So I got that job, and it was a brilliant job because it was a small company that was growing. So I grew with the company. So I ended up I was managing parts of the different parts of the company, and I ended up doing an HR role, or personnel as it was at the time.
Yeah.
Then basically what's happened over time is as I moved jobs, I just got more and more responsibility. But what I learned was in HR, I love working with people. I absolutely love it. But I really do not like office politics. So I don't know if it's my northern background or what, but I'm very straight. I just don't like being deceitful or whatever. I don't tell everybody everything because in HR you've got to be diplomatic. But I don't like being underhand. And there were things that I was asked to do that I thought were absolutely wrong on several levels. And long story short, I thought it was actually making me ill. And so I thought I need to keep what I like, which is working with people, and drop what I don't like, which is this corporate office politics thing. So just before then, I'd done an NLP course, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which I was told was good for business. Actually, it's great for therapy. And in that, there's a weekend that you do that's hypnosis. And at the end of a weekend, which as we all know is 2 days, so 2 days training, I am given a certificate to say I'm a hypnotherapist now, which I was appalled and delighted by. Appalled because I thought there is no way I feel suitable or equipped rather to do hypnotherapy on people with what I've just learned. Mm-hmm. But wow, this is really interesting. So I signed up for an 18-month hypnotherapy and psychotherapy course, first of many. So I'm uber qualified. And it's because it's such an evolving field. I don't think we can ever learn enough about the mind. So I started off with NLP, then I became a hypnotherapist, and I left the corporate world, and I had 2 businesses. So I started off with, because I didn't think I could make a living out of being a hypnotherapist. I thought it was just something I would enjoy, and I get the odd client here and there. So I started off as an HR consultant, building on my skill set. And I did really, really well at that. And but then my hypnotherapy practice started to really grow. I was doing well at that as well. So basically I was burning the candle at all ends. Yeah. And also noticing people didn't really get that I could do this work and this work. And to me, it just all makes sense. So what I did was I rebranded, if that's the right word, my consultancy business so that it's now performance coaching. So actually I've still got 2 businesses and they're very much aligned, but one is for business and one is for private individuals. But there is a commonality between the 2. So it's much less difficult explaining to people that, yes, you can do both of these things.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the NLP to start off with, and just let's try and introduce people to this very complex sounding name, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. Yeah. Sounds like something Chinese government officials might do to you if they capture you and sort
Yeah.
of brainwash you. Tell us a little bit about NLP and what it is.
So I was introduced to it by somebody who said it would be brilliant, and it is, but it's not the magic bullet that everybody says it is. So if anybody says it's a magic bullet, take it with a pinch of salt. But it is brilliant. Basically, neuro is of the mind, linguistic is of language, and programming is reprogramming yourself for success. Basically, in the 70s, two people studied what made coaches and therapists successful. So they studied the best people and see what it is that made the best results. So basically, NLP, as it's known, is not a thing. It's a general approach that has many, probably hundreds of different techniques within it that have been codified so that they can be taught and applied by people who don't go through so many years of training. That's kind of essentially what it is.
And it's focused mostly on frontal lobe development.
No, I don't know that it is actually. That's a good question.
That's my understanding of it anyway. That it's sort of, because the sort of neurological tests that have been done are around neuroplasticity, which is in sort of...
but it does help control the emotions, which is the amygdala.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say
I think it's because of the relationship between the frontal cortex and the limbic system. You work on the frontal cortex. So it doesn't. What I'm saying is it doesn't have any physiological approaches to it. It's mostly language based.
Because I'm now getting mixed up because I know I use so many techniques. Does it have any physiological approaches? I'm 99% sure that you're right. It's just techniques using. I mean, there are some weird techniques as well, like you'll be standing on the floor and doing this and that and the other. About using space.
Okay. Just to give people a flavour. So it's about sitting with somebody talking about things and sort of looking at your thinking patterns and how you might change them. Is that correct?
Yeah. So one of the things is looking at thinking patterns. So a lot of NLP practitioners will technique you. So you'll come to them with a problem and they'll just go into their NLP techniques Rolodex, aging myself there, and just go, I'll do that one. So applying a technique, whereas therapy to me is much more really understanding the individual and why that's happening and so on. So a purist on the NLP side will say, if you apply this really well, then you don't need to do anything. You can do it content free. And although that is true, there's, I work therapeutically with people, and it's not because I think it's more fun. It's because I realize that actually some people, we need to kind of dig in what's under here to do what's right for them. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I'm sort of trying to get very specific about the types of techniques so that people understand them and can sort of recognize them. But it is language based. You go with a specific set of problems and that it can help. I'm also very interested in the fact that you place boundaries on it, because I too have come across people who tell you that, it can cure cancer and it can't, and all of that sort of stuff. That's quite dangerous stuff to be sort of going into. I don't mean literally you can cure cancer, but some people sound like they are almost suggesting it. What do you think are the limits of NLP in terms of what it can and what it can't? You've begun to just talk about it there. It can't deal with some of the what we would think of as deeper issues, maybe stuff.
Yeah, it's kind of, it can cause, you can get what I call miracle cures about things, but somebody has to be in the right place at the time. So what I would say that it's less good at, but you can still use NLP techniques, is dealing with self-sabotage and secondary gains to a problem. Absolutely. So, but you can still use NLP, but when it drives me crazy, when a practitioner says, you just do a phobophobia cure on that and then it's gone. Yeah, maybe it will be gone and maybe it won't be, So I think hypnosis is the same. You get a lot of practitioners that say it's the miracle thing. So I used to coach this hypnotherapist who is also an EMDR specialist, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Now I've studied that as well. I'm quite well qualified in that. And he said he could cure somebody of anything in one session. Well, that's not true.
Yeah, that's not true. That's absolutely.
He said. But what's interesting is I so remember I had to stop coaching him because I thought this is becoming dangerous. He said, but they do. And I said, how do you know? And he said, because they're happy. How do you know? Because they don't complain. So his evidence was the person didn't complain and they didn't book a second session. That just means that they didn't complain and they didn't book a second session. Yeah. He has no idea. And actually, some of the people that went to him then came to me, just looking for a practitioner that could help. So bless his heart was in the right place, but he was very naive. So I think a lot of people are very naive about what these techniques can do. And sometimes they do create miracles, but often they're kind of...
I think I agree with it. It's circumstance dependent. It's not... Yeah. It doesn't provide evidence for something. It's just lucky. It's great if you do get a breakthrough, fantastic. But
and the person might be super ready. It's all about readiness as well, and about motivation, and about where their fear is, and so on. There's so many levels. People are complex, and to me, it's kind of finding for this individual what is a thing that I think would really work for them.
Yeah, great. So thinking about that, what sort of things do you work with people on in terms of the various techniques that you've got? So take us through, and you mentioned EMDR, which is another evidence-based short-term therapy, although it can be long-term for some people, but it's EMDR, for people who don't know, is based upon trauma reprocessing of trauma, so that people are no longer affected by flashbacks and dysregulation and all of that sort of stuff.
So go on.
I'm just wondering the sorts of things that you do deal with, and the various, because we're getting better and better these days at identifying which therapy or which approach works with which problem. And I think that over the last 10 years, that's been the major advances in the sort of therapy fields, is that the specificity of treatments to conditions. So what sort of things are you working with? What sort of things do you work with?
Right, so you're talking about techniques, not problems. Yeah.
I think let's start with the problems, and then we'll look at what the techniques are that are available to people.
So the problems are really wide and varied. At the moment, and as we're recording this, we're still in the middle of this this pandemic. I'm dealing a lot with stress. So stress is probably my mainstay. I'm specially qualified to deal with eating disorders, and I've always got eating disorder clients, but I've noticed in lockdown that the numbers have gone up enormously. And also the other thing that I've noticed is people who have got time on their hands now and have time to think about themselves, their problems, and where their life is going. So a lot of people who are in kind of what's my life all about, or is this it kind of thinking. So those are the broad areas at the moment.
And how are you helping people? Talk us through some of the services that you offer that will help people.
Okay, so my favorite is hypnotherapy, but I don't always do hypnotherapy in a session. Yeah. It's the work that I do has hypnosis in it, even though it's not formal. When we're talking to each other, it's hypnosis. So it can be not formal hypnosis. I do use NLP. I use conventional coaching. I use eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Basically, you kind of it's kind of used. It's called bilateral stimulation. It's getting both sides of the brain to kind of work together to neutralize a trigger. Is basically what that's doing.
Yeah.
I quite like CBT. And that's where I think somebody's really stuck on a way of thinking and just exploring what that what that thinking does and the effect of that, and looking at different ways of thinking about things. What else? EFT, emotional freedom technique, which is
tapping stuff. Yeah.
I use a lot with my client. I teach my clients that. I don't use it as a therapy. I teach it as a self-help tool. Yeah. I teach mindfulness as a self-help tool. There are hundreds of things probably. I pride myself on, because what you said earlier, Noel, was this technique for that problem. The way that I work is this technique for that person.
Right.
This is what I think they would respond to best.
Okay.
So there's a guy that I'm working with at the moment who he feels very, very blocked in his life. He's at an age and he's just thinking, is this it? And I feel so fearful to step forward, but fearful that my life is just going to be this, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what's stopping me. And he had the idea that when he was young, that he had terrible things happen to him. Anyway, so I decided that hypnotherapy would be great, because there's a technique that I use that it's what I call the Rolls Royce of all hypnotherapy techniques, where you go back in time and you neutralize the triggers, get wisdom from them, do some inner child work, and then bring new resources into the present and into the future, and deal with any anger and guilt and misconceptions and self-sabotage as well. It's a brilliant technique. But he couldn't go there. He has so much control. He's got what's called the critical factor, which is like a shutter that comes down going, nope, nope, I don't want to go there, nope, which is showing his level of how highly defended he is. So that might be to do with trauma, or it might be to do with, it's likely to do with a trauma, if I'm honest with you. So basically, I've tried different techniques with him that I think would really benefit him. It's just kind of consuming time. So I'm doing with him now, I'm doing the let's start where we are and move forward. Let's, because what I'd like to do is neutralize whatever it was that's been stopping him. Let's get rid of it. We don't need that. You don't need to carry that around with you forever. You can feel free, and you can feel free to be you, because he puts on a front quite a bit. And so that's where we're starting to go. And he's got very low motivation for his life. So where we are right this moment is he's got low motivation for his life because he's got no purpose. He's never had a purpose except to have fun. And now it's kind of like, don't know if that's enough for me. So we're looking at purpose, and then that will enable us to look at, okay, so how do I, with this feels motivating and fulfilling, yes or no? And if no, we keep tweaking it until it's right. Then we build on that to move forward. So what skills do you need? What are your next steps? It's more conventional.
Right. And have you found that during the pandemic you've had to adapt to what you do? Not just because people are having different issues, but because obviously it's online and all of that sort of stuff. Is it affecting you in that way?
I'm always adapting what I do. So what I like about the way I work is that I have my toolkit, if you like. I have a plan for someone's session. So when I've got an appointment with somebody, I'll always check the notes and think, right, in this session, this is what we're going to do based on what we've done and where we need to go next. But if they present with something else that throws that out the window, I'm not just going to slavishly follow a plan that I don't think is right for them anymore. So I will modify. It's kind of an organic process. Yeah. So that kind of answers that one. Has it changed in the pandemic? Yeah, I'm doing stuff online, which is not my preference. I'm a people person, and I think I read energies very well. I much prefer face-to-face. And I am seeing people face-to-face in a COVID-secure environment, and making sure that all the checks are taken, that they're okay, is definitely my preference. But not everybody can, or not everybody wants to, which is absolutely fine as well.
I've got a feeling though, because I remember, because I did telehealth for many years before other people were doing it, and people were very suspicious of it. But I've got a feeling that the pandemic has just radically changed many aspects of therapy and healthcare in general. I don't necessarily see people going backwards into it, but maybe going forwards into some sort of changed reality where we have, because of course the thing about sort of delivering it online is it's much more convenient. People don't have to travel, they have to spend that hour getting there and the hour getting back. So the hour that you're doing is just that hour, and so it also opens it up. Sorry, go ahead.
It's okay. Oh, also opens it up. Sorry, I enjoy.
And just two other client groups that are much more difficult to reach. So single mums, for example, who are finding it difficult to sort of get the childcare and all that sort of stuff, and farmers who live in isolated farms and all that sort of stuff. So there's lots of evidence that it can be very beneficial, and for people who are extremely anxious and can't get out. The online world is the only way to reach them. So
yeah, because I feel very guilty that there was a man that asked me for help, and could I go to his home? I don't do that.
Right.
And he said, can you do it online? And I said, I don't think it's appropriate. And now, of course, I see I could have helped him. He couldn't find somebody local, and he was I can't remember, a different county. But what I was going to say was, I've got a client that I see in London.
Yeah.
And he's going to go to abroad for a month, to his birthplace for a month, and he's going to carry on sessions.
Great.
Caribbean.
Yeah. That's ideal, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. So there's no interruption in the therapy. It continues, but just in a different place. But they have to be very careful. So I do somebody else who's living abroad at the moment. I usually see her here, and she's abroad. They have to be super careful that they're not overheard, and that the connection is secure. It's not secure. What's the word though? Well, yes, secure, but what's the word that I want? Where it stays. You don't keep dropping connection.
Yeah,
whatever
secure
that
is fine. I understand what you mean, whatever the word is.
Yeah, I think secure. We'll go with that.
I'm not too interested in. Tell us about the sort of corporate work that you're doing as well. Are you working in the corporate space at the moment?
Yeah, so because I'm very well connected, because I've got many years' experience in the corporate world. So a lot of that, it used to be all HR driven, and I could still do that now, but I think I've moved so far away from that now, it's kind of not appropriate. So a lot of the work that I will do now is stress management, which is just a massive issue.
Yeah.
Because people are working.
Biggest killer on the planet, stress.
Yeah, it's shocking. And in the corporate world, well, I don't think it's just the corporate world, actually. I think it's most people. We're expected to achieve more with less.
Yeah. And
with the use of mobile phones and so on, our attention spans are very, very small. I read a statistic the other day that, and I don't know if this is a correct statistic, but I'm just going to recite it to you, that goldfish have an attention span of 13 seconds. Humans now have an attention span of, can you guess the number?
12?
8.
8, okay.
Which actually makes therapy really difficult.
Yeah.
So I notice I'm having to work a lot harder because getting people focused. So a lot of the time I'm working. So it's one of the reasons I use mindfulness. So I teach them how to use it. But in a session, for people who are highly anxious or very unfocused, I will start a session with 2 minutes of mindfulness, just being able to focus in the moment, and it makes a difference to the session because it makes them very much more present.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mindfulness, I think, is a very good tool, full stop, not just mental health, but in terms of a performance tool as well. If you're working at higher levels in a company, learning mindfulness and improves decision making as well as managing stress. And actually, those two go in hand. If you manage stress, you're going to make better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. People are under the misapprehension that they've got to rush through things to get it all done. Yeah. But actually, sometimes you've got to slow down to get it all done. Because otherwise you're just going to be, I think you just said that, you're going to be making loads of mistakes, you're going to miss stuff out, you're going to be duplicating effort that somebody else is doing what you're doing and nobody was communicating because everyone's running, and there are so many problems. So if people just slow down a little bit. Sure. And it only
can you say something about what's happened in terms of the workspace this year? Because I'm guessing that the pressures have increased sort of enormously, particularly on people in management and team management roles. And what sort of things are people presenting with as sort of, I know it's around stress, but has COVID itself increased those problems? I should imagine it has.
So typical things are feeling isolated because they're working from home, so people who are extroverts, and by extrovert, I mean people who get their energy from other people, they're really, really struggling with lockdown because there is no interaction and their energy they've got no energy. It's just like they're like that. As soon as they're talking to somebody, they're energized and thinking clearly.
Sure.
So it suits introverts a lot better because they don't need people. In fact, sometimes too much people interaction can affect them in a negative way. So first of all, the isolation.
Yeah.
Secondly, their workspace. So I'm very lucky. I'm talking to you from my office, and I've got an office that's specially designed. I'm not on my kitchen table and with my husband watching the telly. You know, I've got a dedicated space. But for a lot of people, they don't have that luxury. And so trying to focus when there's and if they've got kids at home as well, which many people do, the ability to focus is massively compromised. And if you've got kids who want your time when you're trying to finish this proposal, is really, really difficult. So that for them, it's teaching them boundaries and space management. But from a leadership perspective, it's how do you keep people informed, motivated, integrated, on point, is quite difficult when they themselves are going through stuff. Exactly. So I said I've had 2 bereavements in lockdown. I'm not the only one, you know, so other people are going through that. Other people are going through their parent is in a care home and they can't get to them.
Yes.
So although that's saving them time, they don't have to go to the care home. The drain on their, you know, the guilt and the sadness that they feel for their parent or whoever it is enormous, and that impacts them as well. Yeah. So sometimes it's dealing with the guilt of all of that, the overwhelm of all of that, the lack of certainty that people have. So as humans, what we like is certainty. As humans, what we don't have is certainty. Yeah. And what we have less of at the moment than ever in the history of man, I suspect, is certainty. We don't know where this thing's going.
You may not have an answer to this question. I'm just interested in sort of people who are working in corporate space. And my sense is, even when we have the vaccine, we go back to some sense of normality, we're still going to have a lot of people wanting to work from home and not necessarily wanting to go back from the office. What's your sense of it, of the sort of in terms of the actual changes that might stay with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very much a possibility. So I think people can be more productive at home. I know that when I used to work in an office, I used to get in at silly o'clock because I work better when there's no one around. In HR, there's always somebody knocking on the door and asking this and that and the other. You get nothing done. So I used to get in at like 7 a.m.
Yeah.
A day late, I put in far too many hours. Anyway, never mind. So I think a lot of people will work from home, but some people just don't feel motivated at home and they need that interaction. So I think what we might find is that there'll be a blend, because I think it's hard to have a motivating, productive Zoom meeting combining many people. I think it's for me personally, that would be true anyway, everyone together. Having said that, a Zoom meeting, people might be more on point. There might be less kind of chit-chat. But the chit-chat can oil the wheels of some different, you know, there's always...
Yeah, very much so. I mean, we want people to form relationships because it's the relationships that deliver the service, not the policies and procedures. It's how people mesh together. So
absolutely. Because they support each other better.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think that it's going to be an interesting time now that we've got the vaccines, and we'll see sort of how we adapt back into some semblance of the previous normality. But I'm always interested in thinking about what are the changes that are permanent. And I think there are, in the health space, without doubt, there are certain permanent changes. So I think my GP, for example, will maintain telephone consultations without doubt. I think we won't go back to sitting in a waiting room full of ill people. And I think that's a good thing, to be honest. I think there have been changes.
I think they'll have to see some of the people, but I think it's right that a lot of it can be on the phone.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of certainly that's my preference. And I think the convenience of getting mental health services via Zoom and Skype and on the phone now is sort of here with us to stay, and that makes a lot of sense. Again, there'll need to be some face-to-face stuff, but I think that there will be some positive outtakes from this period. Do you have a sense of, for you personally and professionally, are there sort of positive things you've taken from this period that you want to maintain?
I think just picking up on what you said earlier, Noel, is that, you know, I quite like that I can see people all over the world now, which I couldn't before.
Yeah.
So I really like that. I have learned about myself. I'm extraordinarily. I've always been productive, but I didn't realise how much. So I'm going to keep producing stuff that give me a joy and hopefully are helpful to others. So I shall continue to do that as long as it's enjoyable for me and helpful to others.
And it's interesting because you're very much the person who walks the walk, as it were. So you've applied, I guess, what you're teaching other people to your own life during this time.
Yeah, I don't want to pretend I'm perfect because I do make a ton of mistakes.
Well, I would hope so. We're not making mistakes. We're not doing very much, are we? To be honest.
Well, exactly. That is so true. People, I tell you what, people. I saw somebody this morning, and she is so doesn't want to make any mistakes. Like that would be the worst thing ever. And today I've got to finally to see actually that's the best thing ever, because that's how you really grow. So this is the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset.
Absolutely.
So with a lot of people I'm working on. So a lot of people have the fixed mindset, which is this is who I am, this is how I'll always be, nothing can change here, I just have to put up with it. That's the fixed mindset, which keeps you stuck. Good luck and enjoy. Or there's the growth mindset, which is actually I can evolve, I can become even better at that and even better at that, and I can learn to get good at that, or I can learn to be good enough, and good enough is fine.
And part of growth mindset is also accepting that at times of difficulty, there's something to learn.